Good morning to you all. Episode 81 of the Anno Domini podcast. Welcome to this Friday, September 27th, Anno Domini 2024. We, as you know, this week, and we are going to keep this going, we have been diving into the 28 principles of freedom that made America the most powerful nation, the freest nation, the most prosperous nation, the happiest nation, the most blessed nation in human history. And I need to, just popped up in my mind right now. It's not that America, this country, this nation is perfect, was perfect, will be perfect, has never been perfect, will never be perfect. But yesterday I was exchanging a couple of words with somebody on Twitter, now X, and this guy was saying, well, America is not supposed to be a Christian nation. And I said, well, America is, I think you're right. It's not supposed to be. America is a Christian nation. This is why, this is the reason, there is no other reason for the blessings and the explosive prosperity of this nation, except if you bring this element to the equation, that the forefathers, then the founding fathers, they found ways, they created ways, they came up with ways, and I believe inspired by God, they came up with ways of managing, of governing, initially a nation with 13 states, now a nation with 50 states. And of course, we're not there anymore, but the foundations are still there. I do believe that the foundations are still there. This is why I keep beating the drum on Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 16. Go back to the ancient paths. America, the United States of America, has, as a nation, a foundation to go back to, a pathway, an ancient pathway to go back to find rest for their souls, as prophet Jeremiah tells Israel. If you go back to what God projected, what God planned, what God created for you, if you go back, if you repent, if you allow the Lord to break your heart, if you submit to him, if you humble yourselves and go back to the ancient paths and let go of all the insanities of that you have been practicing today, not only in spiritual terms, but in governmental terms, in educational terms, in economic terms, in social terms, whatever you want to insert here into the equation. If America, like Israel, was being invited by God to go back to the ancient paths, America has an ancient path to go back to. It's just a matter of turning 180, meaning repenting and starting practicing, to start practicing those principles, those values again. Today we're going to be talking about two other principles. The first one for today, principle number 11, who can alter the government? Remember that yesterday we were talking about the possibility of the consent, the people, when they do not consent with the government, when the people are fed up with their government. It was inserted into the Constitution by the founding fathers that they were not only on the right of doing that, but they were expected to do that. They were expected to kick those guys out and to bring somebody in, somebody better, somebody with character, somebody with principles, somebody aligned with the values that the nation was founded upon. This is the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson. And look at what it says. When a long train of abuses and usurpations, which was exactly what King George III was doing right here to the colonies, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, not only right, but a duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future securities. Look at what he says here, the wording that Thomas Jefferson chooses to use. When a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design. So this word design is a big word here because it is intentional. The ones that wanted back then to enslave the colonies, it was done by design. It was made by design. It was planned. It was not something that just happened like happenstance. It was a plan, and the plan was, we want to reduce them under our absolute despotism. And Thomas Jefferson says, when that plan comes out and can be clearly shown, as I believe we have once again, we have in front of our eyes today, a plan to reduce the American society, the American people, to absolute despotism, under tyrannical government. Now once again, a right, and not only a right, but an obligation, a duty to throw off such government, which means that a part of that plan, a part of the design to enslave people is to cut off, is to remove rights to the minorities, right? Because the idea here is we are a democracy. Remember that. This is so, oh my God, this is repeated over and over and over again. Especially, I don't care when Democrats, when collectivists, I don't care when statists, I don't care when progressivists, I don't care when communists, socialists, progressivists want to say that America is a democracy. I really don't care, because we know their agenda. We know what they are up to. Now, when you listen to somebody, when you hear this word democracy in the mouths of Republicans, people that consider themselves to be Republicans, or Christians, or conservatives, and I always bring Tucker Carlson to this equation, to this moment when I talk about this, because Tucker Carlson is a good guy. I believe he understands a lot of what goes on behind the curtains here in the United States of America, politically speaking, socially speaking. But he has been one of the mouthpieces out there to say, we're a democracy. We have to protect our democracy. We are not doing enough to protect our democracy. And he keeps repeating that over and over and over and over again. We are not a democracy. And we are not a democracy. We know that because the founding fathers said we are not a democracy. They clearly came up against the idea of America, the United States of America, the country they were forming, the nation they were creating. They were absolutely against that. Why? Because in a democracy, the minorities do not have a say. The minorities do not have a voice. In a democracy, the minority do not have rights. 51 against 49. If you have 50 plus 1, whatever those 50 plus 1 people want will happen. And the 49 that are not in the victorious side, let's say it this way, that 49%, or those 49% of people, will not have a say, will not have a voice, will not have rights. Their rights are canceled pretty much. There is no protection to minorities, and there is no protection to God-given rights. And this is why the founding fathers said democracy is evil. And let me show you the strong words that they used against this idea of democracies. James Madison, one of the guys that wrote the Federalist Papers and one of the signers of both the Declaration and the Constitution, said, democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention. Democracies have ever been found incompatible with personal security. You see here the rights, the minority rights, or the rights of property. And have in general, democracies have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. So these guys are looking backwards in history. They're looking back since this idea of democracy came about in Greece, in the Agora in Greece, when they came up with this idea of the people having a say. They knew, and we know, that the idea of democracy in Greece was not the real thing. They were sort of gaslighting people into believing that it was a democracy. But the only people that participated in the life of Greece, and especially of Athens, the capital back then, the ones who had a voice, the ones who had a say, the ones who voted, the ones who had a choice to make in the process, in the civil process, were only the elites, the rich people. For example, women were out, elderlies were out, handicapped people were out, slaves were out. So, what kind of democracy is that? It's that they believe people to be only those that they um, defined to be able to do something. They did not define, for example, that women were able to participate in the process because women were not part of the people. They were less than the people. They were not worth the same value that the other guys that could vote were or had. So this is what the idea behind democracy is. They always, a group of people will define what democracy is. A group of people will define who can participate in it. And this is what is going on right now in many countries of the world. If they decide that a group of folks, for example, Trump supporters, or in Brazil, Bolsonaro supporters, are not to have a voice, that they have to be prohibited from using their voice or from participating, what they do is they just corrupt the whole system, so their votes do not count. So this is the idea of democracy that the founding fathers said, this is ridiculous. We cannot do that. We cannot make the same mistake that these guys did in the past, because a democracy always crushes the minorities' rights. So these were the words from James Madison. Let's hear the words from Samuel Adams, another signer of the Declaration and the Constitution. He said, democracy never lasts long, along the lines that James Madison had talked about. Democracy soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There was never a democracy that did not commit suicide. You see how strong of the choice of words that they find to bring this to the forefront and to the attention of the American people. Alexander Hamilton, this is what he said about democracy. We are a Republican government. I mean, you cannot be more clear or clearer than that. Real liberty is never found in the despotism or in the extremes of democracy. So he's saying the democratic system is very extreme and it is tyrannical. By nature, it is a despotism. So the next principle here that I'm just jumping from the 11th to the 12th is, okay, so if democracy is not what we are, what are the advantages of the republic? What is a republic? What is the difference between a republic and a democracy? You remember that in the Pledge of Allegiance that we make to the American flag, we say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We don't say a pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the democracy for which it stands. That's not what we say. And we don't say that for a reason. And we don't say that for a purpose. The reason is we are not a democracy. The purpose is we need to sustain the idea of a republic, because Ben Franklin, if you remember, and I know you remember because I'm pretty much preaching to the choir here, Ben Franklin, right after the ratification of the Constitution in 1787, when they come out with the Independence Hall in Philadelphia, history says that he was approached by a lady, and she asks him, Dr. Franklin, what is it that we have? What is it that you did there for 3 months inside? Are we now to be, since we are now separated from Great Britain after the Declaration of Independence, are we now a democracy? Are we now, she didn't say that. She said, are we a republic or are we a monarchy? Are we going to have a new king? Are we going to be the same as the country that we left, the tyrannical government that we just fled from, not just 150 years earlier? But are we going to replicate that here, or are we supposed to become a republic? And the response, the answer from Dr. Benjamin Franklin was none less than a very clear understanding of what America was supposed to be. He said, we are a republic. We must be a republic. But he says there's a caveat into that. He says, if we can keep it. We are a republic. We are a Republican government now. But it will cease to be a Republican government if we don't keep it. If we cease to fighting for it. If we do not fight for it, for its sustenance and continuation, it will cease to exist. So that is the idea of the republic that we have. Let us take a look at quickly, very briefly, of course, in a couple of minutes only, the differences between a democracy and a republic, because many Americans don't know that. And I assure you, I am certain of what I'm telling you right now, that in Brazil, in the country that I left, that believe themselves to be a democracy, they do know right now, especially, that the government of my own country used democracy to trample on the rights of the minority in that country. They have become already a full-blown communist country. They already know what the difference between a democracy and a republic is. In a democracy, number one, everyone participates in every decision, which is impossible. Direct democracy is impossible because people have other things to do in their lives, take care of their families, take care of their businesses, create jobs, create employment, invest in their future. I mean, they have a lot on their plates. So whatever people it is, if you have a democracy, if that idea of democracy would to be implemented, everybody should participate in every decision. And this has never happened. And we can go back to all the way 2,000 years ago to Greece. It did not happen. As I told you, there were many people, the Greek people, that did not participate in every decision. In a democracy, point number two, the majority rules, but there is no protection of individual rights of the minorities. There is no protection of property rights, because if the majority votes to take your house away, to take your properties away, to take your guns away, it will be so. It will happen. And this is why in a democracy, as our founding fathers correctly pointed out, a democracy always ends in turbulence and violence, in conflict, in explosion, in social turmoil. Why? Because of these characteristics here. It is impossible for one to participate in every decision when the majority wins the game by voting 51-49 or 50+1. The rights of the minorities are gone. The individual rights of the other people that lost, whatever vote it was, it's gone. property rights gone. And of course, then you are going to come to a point when there is going to be an explosion, a social turmoil happening. What is the proposition of the idea of the republic? And these are the ideas the founding fathers are taking directly from the Roman Republic and from so many writers from that time: Cicero, Polybius, Tacitus, many of those guys that wrote about that, Brutus, even Julius Caesar, that he understood very well what a republic was, but he ended up becoming a tyrant himself, a despot, an emperor himself. So what is the counterbalance here? As while in a democracy, everyone participates in every decision, in a republic, the republic is governed by elected representatives, which does not mean that the representatives can do whatever they want to, because they need the consent of the governed. In a democracy, the majority rules. In a republic is governed by established set of laws. So this is the famous sentence or phrase or quote that we have about this thing. America is not a country of men. We are a nation of laws. So the laws set by the founding fathers, this is one of the reasons that America is the only country in the world whose original constitution is still in force. So in a republic, it is not 50 plus 1, and whatever 50 plus 1 votes, it will change the game. It will change a law. It will change a principle. No, in a republic, a set of laws predetermined will govern and will be what will harmonize the relationships between everybody inside of that republic. While in a democracy, there's no protection of individual rights, in a republic, the individual rights are protected. Even if you lose an election, even if you lose a vote, it doesn't matter. Your rights are still there. You cannot you cannot have your rights taken away. You cannot see your rights being removed from you. That is in a republic. While in the democracy, there's no protection of property rights, in a republic, you have the protection of property rights. For example, the Second Amendment. Everything that relates to you as a property owner is to be protected by law. While in a democracy, that can be overturned like this in a blink of an eye, just because 50 plus 1 people voted. 50%, I should say. And the last part, while in the democracy, it always ends in turbulence and violence, as the founding fathers correctly pointed out. In a republic, it is not that you're not going to have turbulence or even violence, but there is this break. There is this restraint that avoids extremes. And here, these are words that the founding fathers themselves used: tyranny, and the other more modern word, mobocracy, the government of the mobs. This is what you don't have in a republic. This is very easy to happen in a democracy. And the founding fathers saw those things happening many, many, many times in their lifetimes. And they, of course, were reading from history, and they could see how these things were realities in the past. And they said, we don't want this to be a reality with us today, or as now we are creating this new nation. So today, right now, 2024, what is the only thing still standing in the way of full democracy or communism, socialism in America? It's the Constitution. The Constitution is the only thing still as the major obstacle for that achievement, for the complete destruction of the social fabric and the laws of the United States of America. Both Glenn Beck and Mark Levin have been saying for a long time now that the U.S. Constitution is now part of a museum. I tend to agree with them. I see where they're coming from. I see where they're going with this. But the fact that we still have the Constitution in place, for example, is very clear for me, very clear to be seen and observed when you see the power of the 10th Amendment still in place. What is the 10th Amendment? The 10th Amendment clearly says that whatever is not explicitly written in the federal Constitution, it is up to the state's constitution to do whatever needs to be done. This is why Governor Greg Abbott is now working diligently. It looks like, thank God, it took him a long time to do that, but it looks like he's working now full time, and Attorney General Ken Paxton doing that to close our border, to seal our border, because this is something that is written in the Constitution, the federal Constitution, but that they are not doing. So it is up to the Constitution of the states to take action. But the 10th Amendment also says that when that law or that mandate, whatever it is not clearly depicted in the state's constitution, it is up to the people, to the individuals, to make a decision. So the 10th Amendment is still in place, and I praise God for that. I am very grateful for that, because it was exactly the 10th Amendment that allowed us here in Midland, Texas in 2021 to protect ourselves, to insulate ourselves against the mandates that both back then, 3 years ago, both the federal government and the state government were trying to impose on people in terms of COVID mandates. We went to the city hall here with 40, 50 people, and we told our mayor and council members, you do not have the power of the Constitution. The Constitution is not on your side. You cannot. You don't have the constitutional power to impose mandates on the Midland citizens, the Midland residents. And the mayor came up at the end and he said, that is exactly right. We don't have that power. So the 10th Amendment is still very important and very useful, very powerful, and still used. The Second Amendment, to a great extent, there are some things, insane things happening right now, but it's still in place. First Amendment, as much as free speech has been trampled over and crushed, but it's still there. There are many cases that reach out all the way to the Supreme Court on the free speech arena, and the Supreme Court still rules in favor of free speech. So it is not totally, the Constitution is not totally a piece of a museum yet. We still have it in place, which is awesome. So let's use it as long as we have it, because as soon as the Constitution goes away, guys, that is, again, as you see on your screen, the Constitution is the final obstacle for that to happen. So I hope that you could be enriched this week. There were so many more things that I could bring to the table here on these 12 initial principles, but they are just, the surface of everything that we should know about them, the 28 principles that are inserted into our founding documents. So I'm promoting this series of that I'm calling 28 Principles That Made America the Freest Nation in Human History, right after we read the Constitution on September 17th, because I believe that many of the people that were there that day reading their Constitution, they do not understand what those words mean. And these principles are just a way of expanding that understanding of how important it is for us to fight for the principles behind the Constitution and to keep the Constitution in its place. May God bless you, bless your weekend, and I hope to see you here on Monday for episode 82 of the Anno Domini podcast with the 13th principle out of the 28 principles that we have been studying in this long series before the election day on November the 5th. God bless you, God bless your family, and I hope to see you there.